Have you ever imagined a Christmas night that was supposed to be filled with warm lights and laughter, suddenly turning into horror when gunfire rings out in a peaceful cafe? Blood flows across the floor, and a poor, emaciated woman, gaunt from hunger, throws herself in front of a bullet to save the life of an underworld boss she had only met a few weeks earlier. But what pushed them to that life-or-death moment? A 53-year-old Korean man, wealthy, powerful, yet chillingly lonely, and a single black mother, exhausted from poverty with 2 young children, accidentally spills coffee on him on Christmas Eve. Just one small accident shatters the ice-cold heart of the man, igniting a love so fierce and passionate that he is willing to burn down the entire Los Angeles underworld to protect her. Can this love that crosses every boundary of race, class, and sin survive when bullets fly and blood is spilled? Or will it end in the most heartbreaking tragedy you have ever heard? Stay with me right now, because this passionate, painful, and tear-filled love story is about to begin. Before we dive into this chilling and mysterious story, please remember to subscribe to the channel Crimson Romance Stories and like this video. Every subscription, like, and share from you is a huge spiritual gift and an incredibly profound source of motivation for the channel's growth, so we can continue bringing wonderful videos every day to everyone. There would be no greater joy than receiving your love and support through the comments you leave right below this video. Comments sharing your emotion, or telling us which province or city you're living and working in while listening to this story. All right, let's continue together and immerse ourselves in this amazing, captivating story that's filled with deep emotions. I sat alone in the quiet warmth of the 24-hour cafe I owned in the heart of Los Angeles, Koreatown, the one tucked away on a side street off Wilshire Boulevard, where the neon signs glowed softly even on holidays. It was Christmas Eve, and outside, the streets carried a subdued holiday, shimmer strings of lights draped across buildings, red and green reflections dancing on the wet pavement from a light evening rain earlier. The air held that familiar mix of exhaust from passing cars and the faint scent of grilled meat wafting from nearby barbecue spots that never closed. No matter the day, my fair skin caught the warm amber glow from the pendant lamps hanging low over the wooden tables. And beneath my crisp white shirt, the jade magpie pendant my mother had given me decades ago rested against my chest, a small Noragay-style keepsake, carved with intricate knots symbolizing good fortune and family harmony. The only piece of home I carried from Korea to this sprawling American city where I had built my empire. Black coffee steamed in a simple ceramic mug before me. Untouched for the moment, I preferred it plain, strong, no sugar to soften the bitterness, much like the life I had chosen. At 53 years old, I, Ji-hoon Kang, controlled vast underground networks, high-stakes private poker rooms hidden in nondescript warehouses, loan operations that stretched from Koreatown to downtown Los Angeles, territories marked not by signs but by unspoken understandings, and the quiet fear my name inspired. My suits were custom-tailored in dark charcoal wool, fitting perfectly over my broad frame, a symbol of the wealth that insulated me from the world. Penthouse overlooking the city lights, cars that purred with power, men who followed my every word without question. On the outside, I was untouchable, dominant, the man who commanded respect with a glance, but inside, the loneliness gnawed relentlessly, a violent inner turmoil that had grown sharper with each passing year. Guilt twisted like a knife, guilt for the paths I had taken after arriving in America as a young man, chasing success in ways that hardened my heart, guilt for the family I never built. The warmth I pushed away because vulnerability felt like weakness in my world. Nights like this amplified it all. The cafe nearly empty, save for a couple of late shift workers nursing teas in the corner. Christmas music played softly from the speakers, some American classic about home and joy, mocking the fracture deep within me. I had no one to share the holiday with. No laughter filling a table. No small hands tugging at my sleeve. The pendant felt heavier tonight. A reminder of my mother's gentle smile before illness took her too soon, leaving me adrift in this land of opportunity that had given me everything except peace. My thoughts drifted to the empire I ruled, meetings in dimly lit back rooms, deals sealed with handshakes that carried weight, rivals who tested boundaries but learned quickly the cost of crossing me. Yet even in power, there was this relentless, gnawing sense of emptiness, a fierce internal conflict that raged quietly. I told myself sentiment was a liability, that emotion clouded judgment, that survival demanded a heart encased in steel. For years, I had lived by that truth, building walls no one could breach. Mercy was rare, reserved only for calculated gain. I had seen men beg, families shattered by debts they could not pay, and I had walked away unmoved, or so I convinced myself. But the guilt festered, bubbling up in solitary moments like this, whispering that I had become the very coldness I once feared. The café was my quiet domain, a place I visited when sleep evaded me, which was often. The warm lighting cast long shadows across the polished counters, the scent of fresh brewed coffee mingling with faint hints of sweet red bean pastries cooling in the display case. It was open all night, every night, a haven for night owls, insomniacs, and those like me who preferred the hush of darkness. My bodyguards sat discreetly at a nearby table, their presence a subtle reminder of the dangers that shadowed my success. Tony, my most trusted, glanced over occasionally, but I waved him off. Tonight, I wanted solitude, or what passed for it. As I lifted the mug to my lips, the hot liquid burning just enough to ground me, I stared out the large front window at the street. Pedestrians hurried by bundled in coats against the December chill, some carrying shopping bags with last-minute gifts, others heading to or from holiday gatherings. The contrast struck me hard, families laughing under the sporadic holiday lights strung across Koreatown's bustling blocks. While I sat here, a king in an empty kingdom, the inner turmoil surged again. A storm of regret and longing I pushed down with practiced force. I was Ji-hoon Kang, feared and respected, wealthy beyond measure. Loneliness was the price of power, I told myself. Weakness got you killed, yet tonight, on this Christmas Eve in Los Angeles, the walls around my heart felt thinner, cracked by the relentless weight of isolation. The jade magpie seemed to warm against my skin, as if urging me toward something I could not yet name. Little did I know that in mere moments, everything would shatter the careful control. The emotional armor, the profound fracture inside me ignited by a single accidental spill, and the desperate eyes of a woman living on the absolute edge of survival, across the city, in cramped apartments where heat barely worked and hunger was a constant companion. People like Aaliyah Washington fought battles I could scarcely imagine. I had no idea yet of her existence. This beautiful African-American woman, emaciated from endless double shifts, her body undernourished and battered by sleepless nights chasing bills that never ended. She cared for 2 young children and an elderly mother, all crammed into a tiny space where cold winds seeped through cracked windows. Humiliation, a daily companion in lines for aid that barely covered basics. Poverty clung to her like a cruel shadow, exhaustion etched into her features. Despair whispering that tomorrow would bring no relief. The brutal gap between her world of raw survival and mine of extravagant isolation about to collide in ways that would tear my soul open. I set the mug down, the clink echoing softly in the quiet space. My reflection stared back from the darkened window, fair-skinned, sharp-featured, a man who appeared unbreakable, but inside, the conflict raged fiercer than ever. Guilt and loneliness intertwining in a violent knot. I adjusted the pendant, tracing the carved magpie with my thumb, a symbol of joy and good news from a culture I carried within me even here in America. What I needed was not more power, not more wealth, but something to fill the void, something to quiet the storm. The door chimed softly as someone entered, bringing a rush of cool night air. I did not look up at first, lost in my thoughts, but fate, cruel and kind in equal measure, had already set the stage for the moment that would change everything. The soft chime of the door had barely faded when hurried footsteps crossed the tiled floor. The kind of quick, uneven rhythm born from exhaustion and necessity. I did not look up at first, still lost in the storm inside my chest. Fingers tracing the carved lines of the jade magpie pendant beneath my shirt. The café was my sanctuary on nights like this, and interruptions rarely registered unless they carried the weight of business. But then came the crash, a tray slipping, the sharp clatter of ceramic against wood, and the sudden scalding heat blooming across my lap as hot coffee splashed over the front of my charcoal suit. Time slowed. The liquid soaked through the expensive wool instantly, dark stains spreading like accusations across the pristine fabric. My bodyguards rose in unison, hands moving toward jackets with practiced menace, their eyes narrowing on the source of the disturbance. Tony took a step forward, his broad frame blocking the aisle, ready to remove whatever threat had dared disturb me. The café fell into a frozen hush, the gentle Christmas melody from the speakers now sounding absurdly out of place. I lifted my gaze slowly, steeling myself for the annoyance that usually followed such clumsiness. But what I saw struck me like a physical blow, shattering the careful composure I had worn for decades. She stood there trembling, an African-American woman in her late 20s, perhaps early 30s, though exhaustion had etched lines around her beautiful dark eyes that made her appear older than her years. Her uniform, a simple black apron over a faded blue dress, was threadbare at the hems, the fabric washed so many times it had lost its shape. Her frame was painfully thin, emaciated from what must have been months, maybe years, of skipped meals and relentless hunger. Dark circles shadowed the delicate skin beneath her eyes, evidence of countless sleepless nights spent worrying, working, surviving. Her hands small, calloused, nails bitten short, hovered uselessly over the spilled tray, coffee dripping from shattered mugs onto the floor. She looked as though a strong wind could knock her over, battered by cold nights and cruel circumstance, living at the absolute edge of human endurance. Behind her, in the corner booth, two small children watched with wide, frightened eyes. A girl of about 8 years old clutched a younger boy, perhaps 5, both dressed in coats that were too large, hand-me-downs with patched elbows and frayed cuffs. Crayons and scraps of paper lay scattered on their table, quiet entertainment, while their mother worked through the holiday night because there was no one else to watch them. No money for a sitter. No family to help carry the burden. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice soft and restrained, trembling with genuine terror. "Sir, I'm so sorry. It slipped. I didn't see you there. Please, I'll clean it right away." "Please don't." She stopped herself, swallowing hard, as if afraid to say the wrong thing that might cost her the only job keeping her family from the streets. Her name, I would learn later, was Aaliyah Washington, but in that moment, she was simply the most heartbreakingly vulnerable person I had ever seen, destitute, powerless, her dignity hanging by a thread as she waited for my reaction. Dread radiated from her like heat from a flame. Her shoulders hunched inward as if preparing for a blow. The children clung tighter to each other, the little girl's lip quivering, the boy burying his face in her coat. Something violent tore through me. Not anger, never anger. No, this was deeper, more destructive. A fierce, burning surge that started in my chest and spread outward like wildfire, consuming the walls I had spent 30 years building. The sight of her fear, of those children's terror, cracked something fundamental inside me. The guilt that had been gnawing quietly now roared to life, mingled with a protective instinct so powerful it felt like physical pain. How many times had I sat in rooms like this, untouched by the desperation outside my world? How many families had suffered while I counted money and enforced rules in the shadows? The contrast between us was obscene, my custom suit now ruined by coffee, yet easily replaced by the dozen, while she stood in clothes that had seen better decades. Her body wasting away from hunger I could end with a single phone call. "Ma'am?" I said quietly, my voice gentler than anyone in that cafe had ever heard it. I raised a hand to stop Tony, who froze mid-step. "It's all right." Idforing, she blinked, confusion flickering across her exhausted features. The apology died on her lips as she stared at me, trying to process the absence of rage. Her breathing came shallow and rapid, dread shifting to cautious disbelief. "Sir, I can pay for the dry cleaning, or work extra shifts, whatever you need. Please. I can't lose this job. My kids." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she glanced back at the children, shame and humiliation coloring her cheeks. The little girl, Amara, though I did not know her name, yet whispered something to her brother, her small hand stroking his hair in a gesture far too mature for her age. They were hungry, I could tell, not the mild discomfort of a missed meal, but the deep, gnawing hunger that came from rationing food, from choosing between medicine and groceries, from nights when dinner was whatever could be stretched thin across 4 plates. I saw it in their thin wrists, in the way they sat perfectly still, afraid to draw more attention. My heart felt as though it was being ripped in two. I stood slowly, ignoring the coffee cooling on my trousers, and took a step toward her. She flinched instinctively, fear flashing bright in her eyes, and the movement nearly undid me. This woman, this beautiful, broken woman who had clearly fought battles I could only imagine, was afraid of me. Not because of who I was not yet, but because life had taught her that powerful men reacted to mistakes with cruelty. The injustice of it burned like acid in my veins. "Sit down," I said softly, gesturing to an empty chair at my table. "Please." With Enertans, she hesitated, confusion deepening into something close to panic. Her hands trembled as she began gathering the broken pieces of mugs, knees buckling slightly from exhaustion. "I have to clean this first." "Sir, I'm so sorry. It won't take long. My mousse de Saturday. Let someone else handle it," I replied, my voice carrying just enough authority to make the other waitress, who had been watching, frozen from behind the counter, spring into action. Aaliyah straightened slowly, wiping her hands on her apron, uncertainty written across every line of her body. She looked dizzy, as though the sudden absence of expected punishment had thrown her off balance entirely. I pulled out the chair myself, the gesture automatic, born from some long-buried instinct. "Your children," I said quietly. "They look cold. Bring them over. There's hot chocolate on the menu." "On me." And 7Ds, her eyes widened, shock rendering her momentarily speechless. Tears gathered but did not fall. She was too proud, or perhaps too numb, to let them spill in front of a stranger. "Sir, we couldn't possibly. I insist." End quote. The words came out rougher than intended, laced with an emotion I could not name. Not kindness, exactly something fiercer, more possessive. The sight of her standing there, emaciated and trembling, protecting her children with nothing but her frail body, ignited a love so sudden and overwhelming, it stole my breath. It was not gentle or gradual. It exploded through me like a gunshot, passionate, all-consuming, terrifying in its intensity. I wanted to shield her from every cold wind that had ever cut through her thin coat. I wanted to feed her children until their cheeks filled out, and their eyes sparkled with something other than fear. I wanted to erase every moment of humiliation she had endured, replace it with safety and warmth and the knowledge that someone powerful, would burn the world down before letting harm come to them again. She moved toward the booth as if in a dream, her steps unsteady. The children slid out quietly, taking her hands, their small faces pale with uncertainty. As they approached my table, Aaliyah's caution warred with desperate curiosity. Who was this man in the expensive suit who should have been furious but instead offered kindness? Her eyes darted to my bodyguards, to the jade pendant visible now at my collar, to the untouched coffee that had caused all this chaos. I pulled out chairs for the children myself, ignoring Tony's sharp glance. The little boy climbed up slowly, eyes huge as he stared at the menu, pictures of pastries and whipped cream. Amara helped him, then looked up at me with a mixture of fear and wonder. "Are you sure, mister?" she whispered. "Positive," I said, and my voice cracked slightly. The sound surprised even me. Aaliyah sat last, perched on the edge of her seat as if ready to bolt, her hands twisted in her lap. Knuckles white. "Thank you," she murmured, so softly I almost missed it. "You didn't have to, but I did. I had to, because in that moment, looking at her exhausted beauty, at the way she shielded her children even now, something fundamental had shifted inside me. The loneliness that had defined my Christmas Eve was gone, replaced by a fierce, burning need to protect, to love, with an intensity that both terrified and exhilarated me. Outside, the holiday lights continued to twinkle on Wilshire Boulevard, oblivious to the collision of worlds happening within these walls. One spilled cup of coffee had just changed everything, and I knew, with a certainty that shook me to my core, that I would never be the same again. The café held its breath. Every sound faded into a distant hum, the soft Christmas melody from the speakers, the low murmur of the few late-night customers, even the distant hum of traffic on Wilshire Boulevard outside. All of it vanished, swallowed by the sudden, suffocating silence that followed the crash of the tray and the splash of scalding coffee across my suit. Time itself seemed to freeze, suspended in that single heartbeat where everything balanced on the edge of what would come next. My bodyguards stood half-risen from their seats, muscles coiled like springs, eyes locked on Aaliyah with the cold assessment of men trained to eliminate threats before they fully formed. Tony's hand hovered inside his jacket, inches from the handle of the pistol he carried. His broad face hardened into the expression that had made grown men beg for mercy in back rooms across Los Angeles. The other waitress behind the counter had gone utterly still, a rag frozen in her grip, her wide eyes darting between me and the trembling woman who had just spilled an entire pot of coffee on the most dangerous man in Koreatown. Aaliyah herself seemed rooted to the spot, her thin frame shaking uncontrollably. The color had drained from her dark skin, leaving her ashen, and her breathing came in shallow, panicked gasps that bordered on hyperventilation. Her hands, those small, work-worn hands that had clearly known nothing but struggle, hovered uselessly over the spreading stain on my trousers, as if she could somehow undo the damage with sheer will. Tears welled in her eyes but did not fall, held back by a pride that had been battered but never fully broken. She looked like she might collapse at any second. The weight of exhaustion, hunger, and now this fresh terror pressing down on her frail shoulders until they threatened to buckle. Behind her, the children had gone perfectly still in their booth. Amara, the older girl, had wrapped both arms around her little brother Malik, pulling him close as if her small body could shield him from whatever storm was about to break. Malik's face was buried in her coat, but I could see his tiny hands clutching fistfuls of the worn fabric, knuckles white with fear. Amara's eyes large, dark, far too knowing for a child of 8, were fixed on me, wide with dread, waiting for the explosion that experience had taught her. always followed mistakes in the presence of powerful men. I felt it then, the full force of the moment crashing over me like a tidal wave. The violent inner turmoil that had been simmering all evening erupted into something raw and uncontrollable. Guilt, regret, loneliness, they all twisted together into a storm of emotion that threatened to tear me apart from the inside. Here I sat, Ji-hoon Kang, a man whose word could move mountains of money, whose name alone could empty rooms or fill them with fear, reduced to a statue by the sight of a terrified mother and her starving children. The contrast between us was obscene, unbearable. My ruined suit cost more than she likely earned in a month of double shifts. The coffee cooling on my lap was nothing, just fabric, just liquid, while she stood there, expecting punishment that could destroy what little life she had scraped together. And beneath the guilt, beneath the remorse, something else surged. A fierce, burning love that hit me with the force of a physical blow. It was not gentle or reasoned. It was immediate, overwhelming, passionate in its intensity. I looked at Aaliyah, really looked at her, and saw not just a waitress who had made a mistake, but a woman of extraordinary beauty and strength who had been crushed by a world that showed no mercy to the poor. Her emaciated frame, the hollows beneath her cheekbones, the way her uniform hung loose on shoulders that had carried far too much for far too long, it all tore at my heart with claws I did not know I possessed. I wanted to gather her into my arms, to shield her and her children from every cold wind, every empty cupboard, every humiliating moment of begging for extensions on bills she could never pay. The need to protect her was visceral, primal, a fire that consumed every careful wall I had built around my heart. "Stand down," I said quietly, my voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Tony hesitated for a fraction of a second, the briefest pause of confusion before stepping back. The other guards followed suit, sinking slowly into their seats. Though their eyes remained watchful, I raised one hand slightly, a subtle gesture that carried the weight of absolute authority, and the tension in the room eased by the smallest degree. Aaliyah's breath hitched. She stared at me, confusion warring with the lingering terror in her eyes. Her body swayed slightly, as if the sudden absence of expected violence had robbed her of balance. "Sir," she whispered, her voice barely audible, soft and restrained, laced with the timidity of someone who had learned that speaking too loudly to powerful men could cost everything. "It's just coffee," I said, forcing my tone to remain calm despite the storm raging inside me. "Sit, please." He's staff. She did not move at first, rooted by shock and suspicion. Her gaze darted to my bodyguards, then to the children, then back to me, searching my face for the trick. The hidden cruelty that experience told her must be coming. When she found none, the confusion deepened into something close to dizziness. Her knees buckled slightly, and she caught herself on the edge of a table, one hand pressed to her temple as if the world had tilted on its axis. The children watched everything with wide, frightened eyes. Amara's lip trembled, and she pulled Malik closer, whispering something I could not hear, probably reassurance. The kind of empty promises children learn to make when adults fail them. Malik peeked out from behind her coat, his small face pale, and the sight of his fear was like a knife twisting in my gut. I stood slowly, ignoring the wet fabric clinging to my legs, and pulled out the chair across from me with deliberate care. "Your children," I said gently. "They look like they could use something warm, hot chocolate, pastries, whatever they want. That's things." Aaliyah's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a sound that might have been a sob. Tears finally spilled over, tracing silent paths down her cheeks. We can't accept that, sir," she managed, her voice breaking. "You've already been so kind, and I ruined your suit. The suit doesn't matter. Is the 21. The words came out rougher than intended, thick with emotion I could barely contain. I took a step closer, and she flinched again, instinctive. Heartbreaking. The movement stopped me cold. This woman, who had clearly faced down horrors I could only imagine, was afraid of me. Not because of what I might do, but because life had taught her that kindness from men like me always came with strings, with prices she could not afford to pay. I softened my voice further, kneeling slightly to bring myself closer to her level without looming. "Look at me," I said quietly. She did, slowly, her dark eyes meeting mine for the first time. And in that moment, something passed between us, an electric connection that stole my breath. I saw the depth of her suffering, the quiet strength that had kept her fighting when everything else had failed. And she saw something in me. Confusion flickered across her features, followed by cautious curiosity, as if she could not quite believe the gentleness in my expression. "I'm not angry," I said. "I promise you that. Let me help. Just this once." Uncross. Her lower lip trembled. The tears fell faster now, and she wiped them away with the back of her hand, shame coloring her cheeks. I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would you?" "Because I love you." The thought hit me with staggering force, so sudden and complete that I nearly staggered. It was insane, impossible. I had known her for mere minutes, but it was true. This fierce, burning affection had taken root in my heart and was growing with every heartbeat. Passionate and all-consuming. I wanted to be the one who ended her suffering. I wanted to be the reason her children never went hungry again. I wanted to hold her through the nights when despair whispered loudest, to show her that not all powerful men use their strength to destroy. But I could not say any of that. Not yet. Instead, I gestured to the chairs again. "Please," I said simply. After a long moment, she nodded, barely perceptible, and moved toward the children. Her steps were unsteady, as if the floor shifted beneath her. Amara slid out of the booth first, taking her mother's hand, and Malik followed, clinging to Aaliyah's leg. They approached my table like wary animals, the weight of their poverty and fear evident in every hesitant movement. I pulled out chairs for them, one by one, my movements careful and deliberate. When Malik struggled to climb up, I lifted him gently, my large hands dwarfing his tiny frame, and settled him into the seat. He stared up at me with huge eyes, a mixture of fear and wonder, and something inside me shattered completely. Aaliyah sat last, perched on the very edge of her chair as if ready to flee, her hands twisted together in her lap, knuckles white. "Thank you," she murmured again, so softly it was almost lost. "You don't know what this means." "Their work, Salf," but I did. I knew exactly what it meant to someone who had nothing, and the knowledge tore at my soul with fresh intensity. The inner conflict raging harder than ever. How many nights had I sat in places like this, surrounded by wealth and power, while women like Aaliyah fought just to keep their children warm? The guilt was crushing, the remorse a living thing clawing at my insides. Outside, the holiday lights continued to twinkle, casting colored reflections through the windows onto the floor. Inside, the frozen moment slowly thawed, giving way to something fragile and new, something that would change all of our lives forever. Instead of the explosion she expected, instead of the rage that would have shattered her fragile world, I did something no one in that cafe had ever witnessed from Ji-hoon Kang. I smiled. Not the cold, calculated smile I used in boardrooms or back-alley negotiations. The one that made men sweat and sign away fortunes. No, this was something softer, genuine, born from a place deep inside me that I had long believed was dead. It started small, a gentle curve at the corners of my mouth as I looked at Aaliyah's terrified face, at the way her thin body trembled under the weight of anticipated punishment. And in that instant, the carefully constructed armor around my heart, The steel walls I had forged over decades of survival in a ruthless world began to crack. The first fissure was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it spread like lightning through my chest. The violent inner turmoil that had plagued me all evening intensified into something unbearable. Guilt crashed over me in waves, gnawing remorse for every time I had turned a blind eye to suffering like hers. How many women had stood before men like me, destitute and powerless, begging for mercy that never came? How many children had gone hungry while I built my empire on debts and fear? The contrast was brutal. Obscene, my wealth, a towering fortress. Her poverty, a relentless siege that had left her emaciated, battered by cold winds seeping through cracked apartment windows. Her body, undernourished, from nights when food was rationed to the barest scraps. I waved Tony down fully now, my hand slicing through the air with quiet authority. "It's only fabric," I repeated, my voice low and steady, though inside I was anything but. The words felt foreign on my tongue, kindness unpracticed, mercy uncalculated. My bodyguards exchanged glances, confusion flickering in their eyes. But they obeyed without question. They had seen me order consequences for far less. Seen men removed from rooms for daring to inconvenience me. Yet here I was, fair-skinned Korean-American king of Los Angeles shadows, undone by a spilled cup of coffee and the desperate beauty of a woman on the edge of collapse. Aaliyah stared at me, her dark eyes wide with shock that bordered on disorientation. The fear that had held her rigid began to ebb, replaced by a dizzy confusion that made her sway on her feet. She pressed a hand to her forehead, as if the world had suddenly spun off its axis. "Sir." "I don't. It's only fabric," she echoed faintly, her soft, restrained voice trembling with disbelief. Tears continued to trace silent paths down her cheeks, and she wiped them away quickly, humiliation deepening the flush on her skin. This was a woman who had learned to expect cruelty, whose every interaction with power had ended in pain or loss eviction notices, shut-off utilities. The cruel indifference of a system that crushed the poor without remorse. The children sensed the shift. Amara loosened her grip on Malik slightly, her small face peering up at me with cautious curiosity. Malik, emboldened by his sister's movement, peeked out fully, his huge eyes fixed on the display case of pastries gleaming under the warm lights. Their coats, threadbare and oversized, hung loosely on their thin frames, evidence of hunger that twisted my heart like a vice. "Bring hot chocolate," I said to the other waitress, who jumped into action as if I'd shouted, "And whatever pastries they want, the good ones fresh from the case." My voice carried the weight of command, but underneath it was something raw, vulnerable. The jade magpie pendant burned against my skin, a reminder of my mother's gentle teachings about compassion, teachings I had buried under layers of necessity and ambition. Aaliyah's knees buckled then, just a little, and she caught the edge of the table for support. Emotional numbness seemed to wash over her, the shock of unexpected kindness rendering her momentarily adrift. "Why?" she whispered, her timid tone laced with pain. "Why are you being so kind? I ruined your suit." "Men like you," she trailed off, biting her lip, regret flashing across her features for speaking so boldly. "Men like me." The words struck deep, fueling the fierce emotional tension raging inside. She saw the expensive suit, the bodyguards, the aura of dominance that clung to me like cologne. She did not know the full extent of my world, the private poker rooms where fortunes changed hands in silence, the loans that bound men tighter than chains. But she sensed power, and power, in her experience, destroyed. But not tonight, not with her. The surging love that had ignited moments ago now burned brighter, a passionate flame that consumed every doubt. It was overwhelming, this attachment fierce and immediate, anchoring me to her in ways I could not explain. I wanted to kneel before her, to take her trembling hands in mine and promise that no harm would ever touch her again. I wanted to erase the humiliation of her poverty, the heartbreaking reality of sleepless nights wondering how to feed her children, the cold winds that whipped through inadequate housing while I lived in heated luxury high above the city. I pulled out the chair again, more insistently this time. "Because it's Christmas Eve," I said simply, though the truth was far more profound, "and no one should spend it afraid." With Macid, she searched my face, heightened curiosity warring with lingering fear. Slowly, cautiously, she nodded and guided the children to the table. Amara climbed up first, her movements careful, as if expecting the offer to be snatched away. Malik needed help. I lifted him gently again, settling him beside his sister. Their small bodies relaxed fractionally at the warmth of the café, the scent of chocolate and fresh-baked goods filling the air. Aaliyah sat last, her posture rigid, hands folded tightly in her lap. When the hot chocolate arrived, steaming mugs topped with whipped cream and marshmallows, her eyes filled with fresh tears. Amara and Malik stared in wonder, then looked to their mother for permission. "Go ahead. Babies," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "Say thank you to the nice man. That's Nose. Thank you," they chorused softly, Amara's tone respectful, Malik's shy and whispered. The first sips brought smiles small, tentative, but real, and watching them, something inside me ruptured completely. The crack in my armor widened into a chasm, decades of emotional isolation crumbling under the weight of this moment. Remorse flooded me, violent and unrelenting for the life I had built on the suffering of others, for the walls that had kept me safe but alone. The gnawing guilt intensified, twisting with a passionate need to make this right, to protect this family with every resource at my command. Aaliyah sipped her own drink carefully, as if afraid it might vanish, her thin fingers wrapped around the mug, drawing warmth into hands chilled from more than just the night air. "This is too much," she said quietly, her voice restrained and timid. "We don't usually... Things like this don't happen to people like us." Oh, people like us. The divide between our worlds hit me anew. Drawing tears, I refused to let fall. Her poverty was raw, heartbreaking, the emaciation visible in her wrists, the exhaustion etched into every line of her beautiful face. She had endured irrational injustice after injustice, jobs that paid too little, bills that piled too high, a system that offered help only after humiliation. And now, here I was, a man whose influence could change lives with a phone call, offering hot chocolate as if it could begin to atone. "Tell me your name," I said gently, leaning forward slightly. "Aaliyah," she replied, her eyes meeting mine briefly before dropping. "Aaliyah Washington. And these are my babies, Amara and Malik. Hails, Ji-Hoon Kang," I said, the introduction feeling strangely intimate. She nodded, curiosity deepening as she studied the jade pendant now visible at my collar. The moment stretched, quiet and condensed with tenderness, the children sipping contentedly, the cafe's warm lights casting a soft glow over us all. But beneath the tenderness, my inner conflict raged fiercer than ever. This was only the beginning. The love burning in my heart demanded action, protection, redemption. Little did I know how soon the dangers of my world would test it, how rival shadows lurked ready to exploit vulnerability. But in this fragile bubble of warmth on Christmas Eve, the first crack had become a breakthrough, and there was no going back. The hot chocolate had begun to work its small miracle. Amara and Malik sipped carefully, their thin faces softening as warmth and sweetness spread through bodies long accustomed to going without. Little sounds of contentment escaped them soft sighs, the gentle clink of spoons against ceramic, and for a fleeting moment, the cafe felt almost peaceful, wrapped in the glow of holiday lights. and the low hum of Christmas music. But Aaliyah could not hold herself together much longer. She sat across from me, hands wrapped tightly around her mug, as if it were the only solid thing left in her world. Her eyes, those beautiful dark eyes shadowed by exhaustion, kept darting between her children and me, searching for the catch, the moment when kindness would reveal its true price. The initial shock of my gentleness had given way to a deeper disorientation, a dizzying emotional numbness that made her sway slightly in her seat. Tears continued to gather, spilling over despite her best efforts to blink them away. I watched her silently, my own heart in torment. The fierce love that had exploded into existence now burned hotter with every second. A passionate, all-consuming fire that demanded I do something, anything, to ease the suffering etched into every line of her face. She was so thin, so heartbreakingly fragile, her body worn down by relentless hunger, by sleepless nights spent counting pennies and praying the heat would not be shut off again. The contrast between us was a living wound, my custom suit, now stained but easily replaced by the dozen, her faded uniform, washed until the color had leached away, my untouched wealth that could buy entire buildings, her poverty that forced her to bring her children to work on Christmas Eve because there was no one else. No money for care, no safety net at all. I shouldn't have said that, she whispered suddenly, her voice soft and restrained, trembling with shame. About men like you, I didn't mean, I'm sorry. Mr. Kang, you've been nothing but kind. And Ji-hoon, I corrected gently. Call me Ji-hoon, end quote. She looked up then, confusion deepening into something close to fear again. I couldn't possibly, please. With free, the single word carried more weight than I intended, laced with the raw emotion I could no longer contain. She nodded slowly, her lower lip trembling. And then, as if a dam inside her had finally burst, the quiet breakdown began. It started with a small sound, a choked sob she tried to swallow. Her shoulders curled inward, and she pressed one thin hand to her mouth, trying desperately to hold it together in front of her children, in front of this stranger who had shown her more kindness in 10 minutes than she had experienced in years. But the tears came faster now, streaming down her cheeks in silent rivers. Her breathing hitched, shallow and rapid, as wave after wave of pent-up despair crashed over her. Amara noticed first. She set down her mug carefully and reached for her mother's hand. "Mama?" she whispered, her small voice laced with worry. Malik froze, eyes wide, sensing the shift. Aaliyah shook her head, trying to smile through the tears. "I'm okay. Babies. Mama's just tired." But the words broke on the last syllable, and she covered her face with both hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The sight tore through me like a blade. My inner turmoil reached a new peak, violent, chaotic, emotionally tearing. Guilt and remorse flooded every corner of my soul, gnawing at me with teeth sharper than any rival's threat. How many times had I profited from desperation like hers? How many families had been crushed under debts my operations enforced? The injustice of it all, the absurd, cruel misfortune that had driven this beautiful, the strong woman to the absolute edge of survival was unbearable. I had everything: power that could silence rooms, wealth that insulated me from want, men who moved at my command. She had nothing but her children and a frail mother waiting at home, all of them battered by cold winds and hunger and the relentless humiliation of poverty. I reached across the table without thinking, my hand covering hers. She flinched at the touch, then stilled, her tear-streaked face lifting slowly. Our eyes met, and the connection was electric, overwhelming. The passionate love surged again, fiercer than before, anchoring me completely to her pain, her strength, her quiet dignity. "Tell me," I said softly, my voice thick. Whatever it is, tell me. That's gonna be for. She hesitated. Caution warring with desperate need. Her hand trembled beneath mine. Cold, despite the warm mug. Then, in a voice so quiet I had to lean forward to hear, the words began to spill out. It's the loan, she whispered. $18,000. I took it 2 years ago when Mama got sick hospital bills. Medicine. Rent when I missed shifts. They promised low interest. Said they understood single mothers. But the payments kept climbing, and I fell behind. Tonight, they're coming tonight, Christmas Eve. They said if I don't have at least half, they'll... She stopped, fresh tears falling. They'll hurt us, or take what little we have. Mama's too weak to move. And the kids, I brought them here because I was afraid to leave them alone. Raped, her words landed like blows. The children listened with growing fear. Amara's small hand tightening on her mother's arm. Malik began to cry quietly. Confused and scared. Rage cold. Controlled. Deadly ignited alongside the love. I recognized the pattern immediately. Loan sharks operating in the gray edges of Koreatown. Preying on the vulnerable. And worse, I knew the men she described. The tattoos. The names she whispered through tears. They worked for a rival faction. One that had been testing my boundaries for months. Trying to erode my territory by targeting those I implicitly protected. This was no random cruelty. This was war. But beneath the rage, the emotional rupture deepened. Seeing Aaliyah break quietly, dignified even in despair, shattered something fundamental inside me. The gnawing remorse became a roar. I had built my empire on control, on calculated distance. Sentiment was weakness. Yet here I was, undone by a woman's tears, by the sight of children who should be dreaming of presents. Not fearing violence on Christmas Eve, I squeezed her hand gently. They won't touch you, I said, my voice steady despite the storm within. Not you, not your children, not your mother. I promise you that. Where is Sidid? She looked at me then. Really looked, and the confusion in her eyes shifted to something else, cautious hope, fragile and disorienting. Why? She asked again, her voice breaking. Why would you help us? You don't even know us. Is now, because I love you. The truth burned on my tongue, passionate and overwhelming. But it was too soon. Instead, I said, because no one should face that alone, especially not on Christmas. Is the first. Tony caught my eye from across the room, questioning. I gave him a subtle nod, the signal to mobilize. Phones would be pulled out discreetly. Men would move. The loan sharks would be found before they ever reached her door. Aaliyah's breathing began to slow, the numbness giving way to dazed wonder. She stared at our joined hands as if she could not believe the touch was real. The children watched us. Malik wiping his eyes. Amara studying me with new curiosity. Outside, the Los Angeles night stretched cold and indifferent. But inside this small café, something profound was shifting. The quiet breakdown had opened a door between her despair and my redemption. Between crushing poverty and overwhelming power. And through that door, love fierce, burning, transformative was already walking in. The words hung in the air between us, they won't touch you. Not you, not your children, not your mother. I promise you that. Everyone. I had made many promises in my life. Some sealed with handshakes in smoke-filled rooms. Others whispered as warnings that carried the weight of consequences. But none had ever felt like this. This promise came from a place deeper than strategy or power, born from the fierce, burning love that now consumed every part of me. It was a vow carved into my soul, absolute and unbreakable. Aaliyah stared at me, her tear-streaked face pale with shock. The emotional numbness that had followed her breakdown began to fracture. giving way to a wave of disorientation so profound she swayed in her chair, her hand, still resting beneath mine, trembled violently. You can't promise that," she whispered, her soft voice cracking with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. "These men, they don't listen to anyone. They've been coming for months, taking what little we have, threatening worse if I don't pay. Tonight they said it would be different. They know Mama's sick, that the kids are with me. They don't care. Be sly for to SS." Her words ignited a rage so cold and controlled it felt like ice in my veins. I knew these men. The descriptions she gave: Korean tattoos on their necks. The names she whispered through fresh tears matched enforcers from a rival syndicate that had been probing my territory for months. They targeted the vulnerable in neighborhoods I considered under my protection, bleeding them dry to weaken my influence. This was not random cruelty. This was a calculated message aimed at me, delivered through the suffering of an innocent family on Christmas Eve. The injustice of it tore at me with savage force. My inner turmoil reached a crescendo, violent emotional tension twisting with gnawing remorse that threatened to rip me apart. How many times had I justified my world by saying it was business? That weakness invited exploitation. Yet here was the brutal truth. The system I operated within crushed people like Aaliyah without mercy. And men like me, whether rival or not, were part of the machinery. The contrast between us was unbearable. My penthouse high above the city, heated and secure, her cramped apartment where cold winds howled through cracks, where hunger and fear were constant companions. She was emaciated from months of giving her portions to her children, her beautiful face hollowed by sleepless nights, spent praying for miracles that never came. I would not let this stand. The decision crystallized in that moment. Sharp and irrevocable. I pulled my phone from my jacket with my free hand, my thumb moving across the screen with practiced speed. Tony was already at my side, sensing the shift. "Boss, get the cars," I said quietly, my voice carrying the steel that reminded everyone who I was. 3 of them, full detail. "And call Dr. Park, tell him to meet us with everything he needs for a house call. Priority is action." Tony hesitated for only a fraction of a second, long enough for surprise to flicker in his eyes. In all our years together, he had never heard me give orders this impulsive, this emotional. "Boss, maybe we should now." Tony, as certain. The tone left no room for argument. He nodded and stepped away, phone already to his ear, relaying instructions in low Korean. Around the café, my men moved with quiet efficiency, the air thickening with purpose. Aaliyah watched it all with growing confusion and fear. Her hand slipped from mine as she leaned back, dizziness washing over her features again. What are you doing?" she asked, her timid voice barely above a whisper. Amara and Malik had gone still, sensing the change, their small faces pale. "I'm taking you home," I said simply, standing. "To your mother. The doctor will check on her. And those men, they won't bother you again." "It's not, is..." She rose unsteadily, one hand on the table for support. Shock rendered her momentarily speechless, her dark eyes searching mine for deception. When she found none, the fear shifted to something deeper, overwhelming. Disorienting gratitude mixed with suspicion, born from a lifetime of broken promises. "You can't, Mr. Kang Ji-hoon, this is too much. You don't even know us. Why would you risk..." "Because I can," I said, the words rough with emotion. "And because no one should live in fear on Christmas Eve. Is a people, though." The passionate love surged again, anchoring me completely. I wanted to pull her into my arms, to shield her from every cruelty the world had thrown at her. The need to protect this family, to protect her, was primal, all-consuming. My wealth, my power, my influence, all of it, suddenly had purpose beyond survival and dominance. It existed now to lift her from the edge of despair, to give her children the safety they deserved, to ease the suffering of a sick elderly woman waiting alone in a cold apartment. Outside, the black sedans pulled up silently to the curb, engines purring with restrained power. My men opened doors, forming a protective perimeter without a word. The Los Angeles night stretched dark and chill beyond the cafe windows, holiday lights twinkling mockingly on Wilshire Boulevard. Aaliyah gathered the children, helping them into their 2 large coats. Amara took her mother's hand, Malik clinging to her leg. As we stepped toward the door, Aaliyah paused, looking up at me with eyes that shimmered with unshed tears. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "You don't have to." End quote. We moved into the night as a unit, my arm hovering protectively near her back without quite touching, guiding her to the lead car. The cold December air hit us immediately, sharp and biting, and I saw her shiver, pulling the children closer. Her thin coat offered little protection, another reminder of the harsh fate that had battered her for so long. As we settled into the warm leather interior, heated seats, a luxury she likely had never experienced, Aaliyah stared out the window in stunned silence. The convoy pulled away from the curb, 3 dark shadows cutting through the city streets. Tony drove the lead car, his eyes scanning mirrors constantly. The decision I had made was irreversible. By intervening, I was drawing a line declaring war on the rival faction in a way that could not be ignored. Tense confrontations would follow. Bold street-level conflicts were inevitable, as word spread that Ji-hoon Kang had personally involved himself in what they considered their territory. Danger loomed, suspense thickening the air even now. But as I glanced at Aaliyah, her profile illuminated by passing streetlights, exhaustion and cautious wonder warring on her beautiful face, I felt no regret, only certainty. The fierce love burned brighter than any risk. For the first time in decades, I was not acting out of calculation or survival. I was acting out of heart, and nothing, not rivals, not danger, not the ghosts of my hardened past would stop me from keeping my promise. The convoy cut through the quiet Los Angeles streets like black shadows, tires humming softly over wet pavement, still glistening from the earlier rain. Christmas lights blurred past the tinted windows, reds and greens and golds strung across apartment balconies and small storefronts in the less affluent edges of Koreatown. Places where the holiday felt more like a reminder of what families could not afford than a celebration. I sat in the back of the lead sedan with Aaliyah and the children, the heated interior a stark cocoon of luxury against the December chill outside. Amara and Malik had fallen into an exhausted silence, the little boy's head resting on his mother's lap, her thin fingers stroking his hair with absent tenderness. Aaliyah herself stared out the window, her reflection pale in the glass. Shock and disorientation still held her in their grip, her body swaying slightly with the motion of the car, as if she could not quite believe this was real. Every few moments her eyes would flick to me, cautious, curious, laced with lingering fear, and then away again, as though looking too long might shatter the fragile safety she now felt. Her breathing was shallow, uneven, the aftermath of her breakdown leaving her emotionally numb and physically drained. I watched her in silence, the fierce love burning hotter with every passing block. It was an ache now, deep in my chest, intertwined with the violent inner turmoil that refused to quiet. Guilt gnawed relentlessly, guilt for the world I had helped shape, where men preyed on the desperate and women like Aaliyah were forced to choose between medicine for a sick mother and food for her children. The contrast between us had never been clearer. My cars, my men, my ability to move through the city like a force of nature, her life of cold winds seeping through cracked windows, of hunger that hollowed cheeks and stole sleep, of humiliation in endless lines for aid that barely covered the basics. She was emaciated, beautiful in her resilience, heartbreaking in her fragility. "We're almost there," she murmured finally, her voice soft and restrained. barely above the engine's low purr. She gave Tony the address, a modest complex in a neighborhood where rival influence had crept in over the past year. My jaw tightened. I knew the building. Cheap rent. Thin walls. Frequent visits from collectors who answered to the wrong people. The sedans pulled up smoothly to the curb. Engines idling. My men exited first, forming a discreet perimeter under the flickering streetlights. Dr. Park arrived moments later in a separate vehicle, medical bag in hand, a quiet, competent man who owed me favors stretching back decades. He nodded to me without question. Aaliyah hesitated as Tony opened her door. The cold night air rushing in, she pulled the children closer, her thin coat offering little protection. "Grace, that's Mama. She's probably asleep," she whispered. "She gets confused sometimes. The fever's been bad." With a wandered, I stepped out beside her, placing a gentle hand at her back, barely touching, yet steadying. She flinched at first, then relaxed fractionally, the contact grounding her amid the dizziness of this new reality. We moved as a group up the cracked exterior stairs, past doors where televisions flickered behind curtains and the faint smell of holiday cooking mingled with less fortunate scents of damp and neglect. The apartment door was flimsy, the lock cheap. Aaliyah fumbled with her keys, hands trembling. When it opened, the wave of cold hit us immediately. No heat, or barely any. The space was small, painfully tidy despite the poverty. A worn sofa, a tiny kitchenette with a hot plate, 2 narrow bedrooms visible through open doors. Blankets were piled on the couch where Grace lay, an elderly African-American woman frail beneath layers of quilts, her breathing labored and shallow. Aaliyah rushed forward, dropping to her knees. "Mama, it's me. I brought help. We'll be 7. Grace stirred weakly, eyes fluttering open. Confusion clouded her gaze at the sight of strangers, so many men in dark coats filling her tiny home. Fear flickered across her lined face, and she clutched the blanket tighter. "Leah? Who? It's okay. Mama. This is Jihoon. He's here to help." Aaliyah's voice cracked, fresh tears threatening as she glanced back at me. "Doctor." Park moved forward calmly, kneeling beside Grace with practiced kindness. "Ma'am, I'm a doctor. May I check you?" He spoke softly, his hands gentle as he took her pulse. Listened to her breathing. Examined the medicine bottles on the nearby table, half empty, long expired. I stood back, giving them space, but my eyes never left Aaliyah. She hovered anxiously, one hand on her mother's shoulder, the children clinging to her legs. The apartment told the story of their struggle in heartbreaking detail. A nearly empty refrigerator visible through the kitchen doorway. Eviction notices tucked discreetly under a magnet on the fridge. Children's drawings taped to walls to brighten the bleakness. The cold seeped through thin windows, the kind of chill that settled into bones after too many nights without proper heat. My inner conflict raged fiercer than ever. Remorse tore at me the knowledge that my world, my rivals, had contributed to this suffering. The passionate love for Aaliyah now extended to her entire family, a burning need to shield them from every cruelty fate had inflicted. I wanted to wrap them all in warmth, in safety, in the kind of life my wealth could provide without effort. Outside, headlights flashed briefly, my men signaling movement on the street. Tony stepped inside quietly, leaning close. "They're here, boss. 2 cars. The ones she described. Interest today. The loan sharks." Suspense tightened the air. Aaliyah heard him, her face draining of what little color it had left. Dread flooded her eyes, and she swayed, catching herself on the couch. "No, they're early. Mama's too weak, we can't." I placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Stay inside. With the doctor, lock the door behind us." And said, "Non." She looked up at me, confusion and fear, warring with desperate trust. Ji-hoon, I promised. Every 5. The word carried absolute certainty. I stepped out onto the landing with Tony and 4 of my men, closing the door softly behind me. The rival enforcers were climbing the stairs, 3 of them, cocky in their youth, tattoos visible at their collars. They froze when they saw us blocking the way. Recognition dawning. This building's off limits tonight, I said calmly, my voice carrying down the stairwell like distant thunder. The leader, a young man with a spider tattoo on his neck, tried to maintain bravado. Mr. Kang, didn't expect you here personally. We're just collecting what's owed. Nothing personal? Node, if you won. Everything about this was personal. Tension crackled as my men shifted, forming a wall. The enforcers hesitated, hands twitching toward jackets but thinking better of it. They knew my reputation, knew the consequences of crossing lines in my presence. Tell your boss the debt's forgiven, I continued, stepping forward slowly. All of it. And this neighborhood's under my protection now. Spread the word. It's saint. The leader swallowed hard. Bravado, crumbling. You can't just... I already have. It's backs. A long moment stretched. Suspense thick enough to taste. Then, slowly, they backed down the stairs, retreating to their cars without another word. Engines roared to life and disappeared into the night. I exhaled slowly. The confrontation resolved without chaos, but the message sent, war had been declared quietly, boldly. On a street corner most of Los Angeles would never notice. Back inside, Aaliyah opened the door before I knocked, her eyes searching mine frantically. Are they gone? I said simply. For good. 2 was the Tapanos. She stared at me, shock rendering her breathless. Then, slowly, she sank to her knees right there in the doorway, tears streaming freely. The children rushed to her, and Grace watched from the couch with weak confusion. Doctor, Park looked up. She needs proper care, antibiotics, fluids, a warm place to recover. I can arrange transport to a private clinic. We can until Downs in minute. Do it, I said. Aaliyah looked up at me through tears, voice breaking. Why are you doing this? Because I love you. Because I have to. Instead, I knelt before her, taking her cold hands in mine. Because you deserve better than this. End quote. The emotional peak hit us, both her from a lifetime of crushing injustice, suddenly met with overwhelming protection. Me from decades of hardened isolation, shattered by passionate, redemptive love. In that small, cold apartment on Christmas Eve, everything changed. The confrontation on the stairs had ended without a shot fired, without a fist, raised only words, delivered with the quiet authority that had built my empire. The rival enforcers retreated into the night, their taillights disappearing around the corner like cowards fleeing a storm they finally recognized. My men stood watch, silent and vigilant, as I turned back to the apartment door. But the night was not finished with us. As I stepped inside, closing the door against the cold, a new wave of headlights swept across the windows, brighter, faster, more aggressive. Engines revved outside, tires screeching to a halt. Tony's phone buzzed instantly, his face hardening as he listened. Boss, they brought backup. 4 more. They're not leaving quietly. Well, is the first in the pot up? Aaliyah heard him. She had been kneeling beside Grace, helping Dr. Park adjust an IV line he had started with supplies from his bag. At Tony's words, she froze, dread flooding her features like dark water rising. Her thin body began to shake again. The brief moment of relief shattered. No, please. No, she whispered, her voice soft and broken. She pulled Amara and Malik close, the children whimpering as they sensed their mother's terror returning tenfold. Grace stirred weakly on the couch, confusion clouding her feverish eyes. "Leah, what's happening?" "It's okay, Mama." Aaliyah lied, her arms tightening around the children. But her own breathing came in panicked gasps. Dizziness washing over her as the reality crashed down. Shock rendered her momentarily numb, her face ashen. My heart, God. My heart felt as though it was being torn in two directions at once. The fierce, passionate love for Aaliyah surged with protective fury, while violent inner turmoil raged alongside it. Remorse clawed deeper than ever. This was my fault. By intervening, I had painted a target on her door. My world, ruthless, shadowed, had spilled into hers, threatening the very family I now burned to save. The contrast was excruciating. My power could summon cars and doctors in minutes, could make men back down with a word. Her life had been one of powerlessness, crushed by irrational injustice, by cruel misfortune that left her emaciated and exhausted, her children knowing fear before joy. I would not let it claim them. "Get them to the back bedroom," I ordered Dr. Phillip. "Park quietly. Lock the door. Stay low. Everyone," he nodded, moving swiftly to help Aaliyah lift Grace. She resisted at first, confusion turning to fear. "Jihoon, what's going on? They're coming inside? They won't get past us," I said, my voice steady despite the storm within. I cupped her cheek briefly, my hand warm against her cold skin, and the contact sent fire through me. Her eyes met mine, wide with terror and desperate trust. And in that moment, the love anchored me completely. I promised, "A team." She searched my face, tears spilling anew, then nodded and allowed Dr. Park to guide her and the children down the short hallway. The door closed softly behind them, the lock clicking. Tony and my men took positions too at the windows, others near the door. I stood in the center of the small living room, jade, magpie, heavy against my chest, waiting. The door burst open without a knock, 4 men storming in. The original 3 plus reinforcements, faces twisted with false bravado. The leader, spider tattoo, stark under the harsh overhead light, brandished a bat. "You don't get to decide our collections, Kang. This ain't your territory anymore." Thanks for watching. Suspense thickened the air. Danger, crackling like electricity. My men tensed but held, waiting for my signal. The intruders spread out, knocking over a small table in their aggression, shattering a lamp that plunged part of the room into shadow. "This ends tonight," I said calmly, stepping forward. My presence filled the cramped space, dominance radiating like heat. "Leave now, and you walk away. Stay, and you learn what crossing me really means." End quote. The leader laughed, nervous, forced, and swung the bat at a shelf, sending children's drawings fluttering to the floor like broken dreams. Amara's crayon pictures, carefully taped up to brighten the bleak walls. The sight ignited something primal in me. One of my men moved first, a swift disarm. The bat clattering away. Chaos erupted, but controlled, no guns drawn. Only the sharp sounds of struggle. Bodies colliding with furniture in the tight space. My men were better trained, more disciplined. Within moments, the intruders were subdued, pinned against walls, wrists secured with zip ties from Tony's pocket. The leader spat blood, glaring up at me from the floor. "This'll start a war. Kang, you know that. Good, let it," I replied, voice deadly calm. "Touch this family again or anyone in this building and there won't be enough of you left to start anything." "That's really Tam." I nodded to my men. They hauled the rivals out, bundling them into the waiting cars for a different kind of conversation later. Away from here. The door closed behind them, leaving sudden silence broken only by muffled crying from the bedroom. I went to them immediately, knocking softly. "It's over. It's safe. is like the seven. The door opened slowly. Aaliyah stood there, face streaked with tears, body trembling from the emotional whiplash, terror to numb shock to overwhelming relief. The children clung to her, Malik sobbing quietly. Grace lay on the bed behind them. Weak but aware, Aaliyah looked at me, then passed me to the wrecked living room, and something broke inside her. She sank to her knees again, right there in the hallway, covering her face as sobs tore free deep. Wrenching sounds of release after years of holding everything together alone. I knelt before her, gathering her gently into my arms. She resisted for only a heartbeat, then collapsed against me, her thin frame shaking. The children pressed close, and I enveloped them all, my large arms forming a shield against the world. The passionate love surged to an emotional peak, burning, tearing, redemptive. Holding her, feeling her tears soak my shirt. I knew I would raise empires to keep her safe. The remorse was excruciating. My intervention had brought danger, yet also salvation. The injustice of her life, the poverty that had left her so vulnerable, amplified my torment. Drawing silent tears I refused to let fall. "You're safe," I whispered into her hair. "All of you. I swear it. I think it not." She pulled back slightly, eyes searching mine through tears. "How can I ever repay you?" "You don't," I said fiercely. "You never have to." Hazakter, in that quiet, emotionally condensed moment amid the wreckage of her small home, with her children pressed close, and Grace watching weakly from the bed, love wrapped around us like warmth against the cold night outside. The ambush had come and gone. The rescue was complete. But the war I had just declared was only beginning, and for her, for them, I would fight it with everything I had. The warehouse on the edge of downtown Los Angeles stood silent under the sodium glow of streetlights, its concrete walls thick enough to swallow sound and secrets alike. It was one of my properties, discreet, untraceable, the kind of place where serious conversations happened far from prying eyes. My men had brought the subdued enforcers here after the ambush at Aaliyah's apartment, securing them to metal chairs in the vast empty space. The air smelled of dust and old oil, cold seeping through the high windows despite the late hour. I entered alone, my footsteps echoing. The captives, 5 in total, wrist-bound, looked up as the overhead lights flickered on. Their earlier bravado had evaporated, replaced by the pale fear of men who now understood the depth of their mistake. The leader with the spider tattoo sat in the center, blood dried at the corner of his mouth. Beside him was a younger man I had not paid much attention to during the chaos. Sharp features, fair skin beneath the grime, eyes that held a defiant glint even now. Tony and 2 others took positions by the door. Silent shadows. I walked slowly, deliberately, letting the weight of my presence settle over them. The jade magpie pendant rested heavy against my chest, a reminder of the mother I had lost too young, of the family I had never built. Tonight, that emptiness felt sharper than ever, intertwined with the fierce love that had taken root for Aaliyah and her children. Protecting them had brought me here, to this moment of reckoning. "Gentlemen," I said quietly, my voice conversational yet edged with steel, "you made a serious error tonight, targeting a family on Christmas Eve, terrorizing a mother and her children over money they never should have owed." End quote. The spider-tattooed leader shifted uncomfortably. "It was just business, Mr. Kang." The woman fell behind. "We were sending a message. We note was out." "A message?" I repeated, stopping in front of him. "To whom?" "Exactly?" He hesitated, then spat to the side. "To everyone in that building. To you. Word is you're going soft, letting debts slide. Our boss wanted to remind the neighborhood who really runs things now." With Hillming and others, the words landed like a slap. My rivals had grown bolder, using innocent suffering to test my boundaries. The injustice burned irrational, cruel, the kind that crushed the powerless, while men like me played games of territory and respect. Aaliyah's emaciated frame flashed in my mind. Her sleepless nights, the cold winds that had battered her family while I lived in insulated luxury. Remorse tore through me anew, violent and unrelenting. How many others had suffered because of the shadows I cast? I turned to the younger man beside the leader. He had been silent, watching me with an intensity that now struck me as familiar, something in the set of his jaw, the shape of his eyes. "You've been quiet," I said. He met my gaze steadily, defiance flickering. "Nothing to say." Jihun, in another wells to the created. The use of my first name without honorific, without fear, stopped me cold. My men tensed behind me. No one addressed me that way, ever. "How do you know my name?" I asked. Voice low, a bitter smile twisted his lips. "Because you're my brother." Mir. The warehouse seemed to tilt. Shock hit me like a physical force disorientation. Dizziness. A deep emotional rupture that stole my breath. The world narrowed to his face, to the features that mirrored mine in ways I had never noticed. The fair skin, the sharp cheekbones, the eyes that carried the same Korean heritage beneath the anger. "Half-brother," he corrected, voice cracking with years of resentment. "Same father, different mothers. He left mine in Seoul before coming to America. Left her with nothing but a baby and promises he never kept. I grew up hearing about the successful son in Los Angeles, the one who got everything, the one who forgot where he came from. No, well, the revelation crashed over me in waves. Min Jae. His name surfaced from buried memories, whispers my father had silenced. Letters destroyed. A past he had buried under ambition when he immigrated. I had been a boy when he died. Never told the full truth. The gnawing guilt that had plagued me all night now exploded into something unbearable. This man, this rival enforcer, was family. Blood. And tonight, he had been part of the group terrorizing Aaliyah's home. My inner turmoil reached a shattering peak. Violent emotional tension warred with the passionate love that anchored me to Aaliyah. How could I reconcile this? Mercy for blood, justice for the woman I loved. The remorse was excruciating. My father's abandonment had created this bitterness, and now it threatened everything I was fighting to protect. Tony stepped forward, uncertain. "Boss?" I raised a hand, silencing him. My voice, when it came, was steady despite the storm. "Untie him. There's a very doing stelv. Making tappin." My men hesitated, then obeyed. Min Jae rubbed his wrists, staring at me with a mixture of hatred and desperate curiosity. "Why?" I asked quietly. "Why target her building? Why tonight?" He laughed bitterly. "Orders. But yeah, part of me wanted you to feel it. The helplessness, the way my mother felt every day raising me alone while you lived like a king. They're finders." End quote. The words cut deep. I saw Aaliyah's face, her tears, her thin body collapsing in relief and fear. I saw Grace weak on the couch, the children clinging to their mother. And now this. Family betrayal woven into the cruelty. I stepped closer, voice dropping. "Your mother's pain was our father's sin, not mine. But tonight, you made innocence pay for it. A sick, elderly woman. Children who have nothing. That ends here. They be Simmons." Min Jae's defiance cracked, pain flashing across his features. "What happens now? You kill your own brother?" The question hung heavy. My heart tore in opposite directions, blood calling for mercy. Love for Aaliyah, demanding justice. The emotional rupture was complete shock, giving way to a profound, aching sorrow. "No," I said finally. "I banish you. You leave Los Angeles. Tonight, all debts in that neighborhood erased, every dollar returned, and you never come back." Had a beast. He stared, disbelief shifting to something raw. "You'd let me live? For her?" I said, thinking of Aaliyah. Because hurting you further would hurt innocence. But cross me again, touch anyone under my protection, and blood won't save you. I was no. Silence stretched, thick with unspoken history. Minjay nodded slowly. Tears in his eyes he refused to let fall. My men escorted him out separately. Arrangements already in motion. I stood alone in the warehouse aftermath. The revelation echoing in my soul. The shocking truth of family fractured and lost intensified every emotion. The passionate love for Aaliyah now my guiding light. The remorse, a fire that would drive me to make things right. Outside, the city slept unaware. Inside, a brother had been spared, and a man had been forever changed. The warehouse door closed behind Minjay with a heavy finality. The sound echoing through the vast space, like the closing of a chapter I had never known existed. My men stood silent, waiting for orders, but I could not speak yet. The revelation still thundered inside me, my half-brother. Blood I had never acknowledged, now banished by my own word. The emotional rupture was complete, shock giving way to a deep, aching sorrow that mingled with the fierce love burning for Aaliyah. Two families, fractured in different ways, colliding through cruelty and chance on this Christmas night. I turned back to the remaining captives, the spider-tattooed leader and his 3 companions still secured to their chairs. Their faces reflected a mix of fear and confusion. The earlier defiance drained away by the unexpected turn. They had expected vengeance, perhaps worse. Instead, they had witnessed mercy extended to one of their own because of blood. The leader shifted uncomfortably. So what now? Kang, you let him go because he's family? What about us? His voice held a desperate edge. But beneath it lay the same bitterness I had heard in Minjay's words. Men like him operated on the edges of survival, justifying cruelty as business, preying on the vulnerable because someone had preyed on them first. I saw Aaliyah in my mind, her thin, emaciated frame, the hollows beneath her beautiful eyes from sleepless nights and hunger shared with her children, Grace weak and feverish on that worn couch, the children who had known fear long before joy, the injustice of it all, the absurd, heartbreaking unfairness that allowed men to terrorize families over debts born of desperation, ignited a rage so profound it threatened to consume me. Yet rage alone would not end this cycle. I stepped closer, my presence filling the cold warehouse. You hurt a family tonight, I said quietly, voice steady despite the violent inner turmoil. A mother who gave her last dollars for medicine, children who watched their home invaded, an elderly woman too weak to defend herself. Over what? Money she borrowed because life left her no choice. There may can't, the leader opened his mouth to protest. But I continued. Your boss sent you to weaken me, to prove territory could be taken by making the innocent suffer. But look at what you've done. Look at the line you crossed. There was an nods. One of the younger enforcers looked away, shame flickering across his features. The spider-tattooed man tried to hold my gaze, but his bravado cracked. We were following orders, he muttered. You know how it works. 30S. I do, I replied. Better than most? Beatport 1999. The passionate love for Aaliyah anchored me now. A burning emotional core that demanded more than vengeance. Mercy for Minjay had been born of blood. But this could be born of something greater. Redemption. The gnawing remorse that had plagued me since the café intensified. Decades of building power on the backs of the desperate. Turning a blind eye to suffering like hers. The contrast was unbearable, my wealth that could erase debts with a phone call. Her poverty that had left her destitute. Humiliated. Existing at the very edge, I pulled out my phone, dialing a number my men knew well. It's Kang, I said when the rival boss answered. We need to talk. Now. Neutral ground, the old garage on Alameda. 7, he agreed quickly, sensing the shift. Word of the night's events had already spread. I turned back to the captives. "You're going to help fix this," I told them. Every dollar collected from that building, from that neighborhood, returned. Every family you pressured relieved. Or you don't walk away. They nodded. Fear replacing defiance. My men untied them, escorting them out for processing repayment plans enforced. Warnings delivered. The drive to the meeting was short. The Los Angeles streets quiet in the pre-dawn hours. Christmas lights still twinkled on some homes, mocking the darkness we carried. Tony drove, glancing at me occasionally. "You sure about this?" "Boss, meeting him alone?" "I'm sure." The abandoned auto shop on Alameda was neutral territory. Rusted bay doors open to the night. The rival boss waited with his own crew, 6 men trying to look intimidating under flickering fluorescent lights. He was younger than me, flashier, gold chains glinting. "Kang," he greeted. Extending a hand I ignored. "Heard you got involved in street level tonight. Unusual for you." "Wud and splot." I studied him, cataloging weaknesses. "Your men targeted a family in my territory. A single mother, children, an elderly woman, on Christmas Eve, 2000, he shrugged. False confidence, masking nervousness. Debts are debts. She fell behind. That's me, 3 months. I said, because she chose medicine over payments. You call that fair game? His crew shifted. Uncomfortable? Even they sensed the line crossed. I stepped closer. Here's what happens. You pull out of that neighborhood. Every operation, every collection, debts forgiven, money returned with interest if I feel generous. There's no two in the bury place, he laughed. But it rang hollow. You don't dictate terms to me. Thanks for watching. I already am. Thanks for watching. And I think the next time. Tension crackled. His men reached toward jackets. Mine did the same outside. Suspense hung thick. Danger, electric. But no one moved further. My reputation preceded me, the quiet power that ended conflicts before they began. Finally, he backed down. Fine, we'll pull back. But this isn't over. Brack things. It is for them, I said. Cross into that area again, and it becomes personal. End quote. We stared each other down until he nodded, retreating with his crew. Another bold confrontation resolved street level. Tense, but bloodless. Back in the car, the emotional peak hit me fully. Mercy extended. Justice served without destruction. The passionate love for Aaliyah had guided at her face. Her tears. Her strength in poverty driving me to be better than the world I ruled. Dawn was breaking as I returned to the private clinic where I had arranged for Grace, Aaliyah, and the children to be taken. Quiet. Secure. The best care money could buy. Aaliyah met me in the hallway. Eyes red from exhaustion and tears. Jihoon, Mama's stable. The doctors say she'll recover. It's spring that it. Relief flooded me, mingling with the love that now defined me. I pulled her gently into my arms. Holding her close, she melted against me. The emotional rupture of the night giving way to tentative peace. In that quiet moment of tenderness, amid the chaos resolved, I knew mercy had won, and love had changed everything. Days had passed since Christmas Eve, but the events of that night still echoed in my soul like distant thunder. Grace was recovering steadily in the private clinic, warm, comfortable, surrounded by the kind of care my resources could command without effort. Aaliyah and the children visited daily, their faces slowly losing the sharp edges of fear and hunger. Color returned to their cheeks. Small smiles came easier. And in those quiet moments watching them, the fierce love I felt for Aaliyah grew deeper, more passionate, anchoring me in ways I had never imagined possible. Yet peace was fragile in my world. I had returned Aaliyah to her shift at the café a few days later, not because she needed the money any longer. I had seen to that quietly, but because she insisted on normalcy, on earning her way until she felt steady again. Pride ran deep in her, a quiet strength forged in poverty's fire. I respected it, even as every protective instinct screamed to keep her wrapped in safety forever. That afternoon, I sat in my usual corner booth, the cafe quieter than usual in the post-holiday lull. Sunlight filtered through the windows, casting warm patterns on the wooden tables. Aaliyah moved between customers with a new lightness still thin, still marked by years of struggle, but no longer carrying the weight of terror. Amara and Malik were at school now, funded by anonymous scholarships I had arranged. Grace rested comfortably miles away. I watched Aaliyah with the intensity of a man possessed. The passionate love had only intensified, burning, all-consuming, a constant ache in my chest. Every smile she gave a customer, every gentle laugh, felt like a gift meant only for me. The inner turmoil remained, gnawing remorse for the life I had led, violent emotional tension as rivals circled, testing the boundaries I had redrawn. Minjay's banishment haunted me, blood sent away to protect the family I now cherished more than my own legacy. Tony sat nearby, alert as always, quiet today. Boss, with so, too quiet. The first indication came as a low rumble outside a car engine revving too aggressively on Wilshire Boulevard. Then tires screeched. My men tensed instinctively. Aaliyah was crossing the cafe with a tray of coffees when the front window exploded in a shower of glass. Gunfire rapid. Targeted, shattered, the calm. Customers screamed, diving for cover. Tony lunged toward me, but I was already moving. Time slowed to a crawl. I saw the muzzle flash from the passing car, saw the bullets tear through tables and walls. And then I saw Aaliyah directly in the line of fire, tray crashing to the floor as she turned toward the sound. She saw it too, saw the danger aimed not randomly, but at me. In that frozen heartbeat, something extraordinary happened. Aaliyah threw herself forward, not away, but toward me. Her thin body launched across the space, arms outstretched, slamming into me with surprising force. We crashed to the floor together behind the counter as bullets whizzed overhead, splintering wood and shattering mugs. Pain exploded in my awareness, not mine, but hers. A sharp cry escaped her as one bullet found its mark, tearing through her shoulder. Blood bloomed dark against her uniform, warm and shocking against my hands as I caught her. No, the roar tore from my throat, raw and primal. I rolled us both into cover, shielding her with my body as my men returned fire-controlled bursts that sent the attacking car speeding away. Tires screaming, the cafe fell into stunned silence, broken only by sobs and the distant wail of approaching sirens my men had summoned discreetly. Customers huddled on the floor, unharmed but terrified. Aaliyah lay in my arms, face pale with shock. Blood seeped steadily from the wound in her shoulder, her breathing shallow and rapid. Her eyes, those beautiful dark eyes, found mine, wide with pain and something deeper. "Jihoon," she whispered, voice faint and trembling. "You're okay?" The question undid me completely. She had taken a bullet meant for me. This woman who had known nothing but cruelty from the world, who had lived emaciated and destitute, battered by cold winds and sleepless nights of despair, had chosen in that instant to protect me. The emotional rupture was catastrophic shock, disorientation, a violent inner struggle that tore my soul apart. Remorse crashed over me in waves. My world had nearly killed her. The one person who had cracked my armor and filled the void with love. I pressed my hand to the wound, applying pressure, my other arm cradling her close. "I'm here," I said, voice breaking. "Stay with me. Aaliyah, please." Then gedekt. Tony was already calling for the doctor. My men securing the perimeter. The danger had passed as quickly as it came, a drive-by message from the rival boss I had humiliated days earlier. Retaliation. Bold. Reckless. Street-level warfare brought to daylight. Aaliyah's hand clutched my shirt weakly, blood staining the fabric. Pain etched her features, but her eyes never left mine. The kids. Mama, they're safe. I promised fiercely. I swear it. Protected. Always. That is Apicense. Tears spilled down her cheeks, mixing pain with overwhelming emotion. The shock of being shot, of nearly dying to save me, rendered her dizzy, her body trembling in my arms. Yet beneath the fear, something shone through. Love. Reciprocal. Passionate. Born in the fire of that moment, sirens grew closer. Dr. S.I. Park arrived within minutes, my call cutting through traffic. He worked quickly on the floor of the café, stabilizing her as paramedics took over. I refused to let go of her hand, even as they loaded her onto the stretcher. In the ambulance racing through Los Angeles streets, I held her gaze. You saved my life, I said, the voice thick with tears I no longer hid. You saved mine first, she whispered, weak but certain. The emotional peak was shattering for her. The disorienting shift from crushing poverty to being cherished by a powerful man now deepened into life or death devotion. For me, the passionate love reached new heights, mingled with terror at how close I had come to losing her. At the hospital, private, secure surgery began immediately. I paced the hallway, torment raging. My men eliminated the threat quietly in the hours that followed. The shooters identified. The rival boss receiving a message he could not ignore. When the doctor emerged, she'll recover fully. Relief flooded me so completely I nearly collapsed. In her room later, bandaged and pale but awake, I sat beside her bed, taking her hand again. The children and Grace were brought safely, their faces lighting at seeing her alive. In that quiet moment of tenderness amid chaos, our eyes met, the love fierce, burning, mutual, needed no words. The deadly ambush had nearly taken her from me, but it had also bound us forever. The hospital room was quiet, except for the steady beep of monitors and the soft hum of machines keeping watch over Aaliyah's recovery. Private suite. Top floor. Windows overlooking the glittering sprawl of Los Angeles at night. The kind of care my name and resources commanded without question. I had not left her side since surgery ended. Seated in the chair, pulled close to her bed, one of her hands cradled gently in both of mine. The bandage on her shoulder was thick and white, a stark reminder of the bullet she had taken for me. She slept fitfully at first, pain medication pulling her under, her beautiful face pale against the pillow. I watched every breath, every small movement. The fierce love in my chest, now laced with terror at how close I had come to losing her. The ambush replayed endlessly in my mind. The explosion of glass, the gunfire, her body launching across the space to shield me. A woman who had known only deprivation, emaciation from giving her food to her children. Sleepless nights, worrying over bills. Cold winds cutting through thin walls had chosen self-sacrifice for a man she barely knew. The emotional rupture was total. Violent inner turmoil raged without cease, remorse for dragging her into my dangerous world. Gnawing guilt for every moment of suffering her poverty had inflicted while I lived in insulated luxury. The passionate love burned hotter than ever, anchoring me to her bedside, refusing to let me move even when nurses gently suggested I rest. Hours blurred. Tony checked in quietly, updating me on the streets. The shooters identified. The rival boss's operations crumbling under pressure. No further threats for now. I nodded absently, my focus entirely on her. As dawn crept through the blinds, painting soft gold across the room, Aaliyah stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, dark and clouded with pain and medication. Finding me immediately, Confusion flickered first, disorientation from the drugs, from the unfamiliar luxury of the room, then recognition, then something deeper. Ji-hoon? Her voice was soft, restrained, hoarse from the tube they had removed hours earlier. She tried to shift, wincing as pain lanced through her shoulder. "I'm here," I said quickly, leaning forward, my thumb brushing gently across her knuckles. "Don't move. You're safe." Les de Biz. Her gaze traveled over the room, the private suite, the flowers my men had delivered, the quiet efficiency of the best hospital in the city. Shock widened her eyes, dizziness washing over her features as the reality settled. This place, how, doesn't matter," I said gently. "Only you matter. You and your family." End quote. So that serum, tears gathered instantly, spilling down her cheeks. The emotional whiplash hit her hard, from the terror of gunfire, the searing pain of the bullet, to waking in safety and comfort she had never known. Numbness gave way to overwhelming gratitude, then to a deep, aching vulnerability. I thought I wouldn't wake up," she whispered, voice breaking. "The kids, Grace, they're here," I assured her. "Safe. In the next room. They've been waiting to see you." In Ashley walks, fresh tears fell. She turned her face into the pillow briefly, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The weight of everything, years of crushing poverty, of humiliation and powerlessness, now contrasted with this overwhelming protection, tore through her. When she looked back at me, her eyes held a mixture of awe and cautious wonder. "Why me?" she asked, the question raw. "You could have anyone. You have everything. Why risk it all? For us?" The moment had come. The confession I had carried since the café, since the first crack in my armor, could no longer be contained. I leaned closer, my voice low and thick with emotion. "Because from the second you spilled that coffee, from the moment I saw your fear, your strength, the way you protected your children with nothing but love, I was lost. I fell in love with you, Aaliyah, completely, irrevocably. It hit me like nothing ever has. Fierce, burning, all-consuming. That was Doai." Look down, her breath caught. Shock rendered her motionless, eyes wide as my words sank in. "I've lived my life closed off," I continued, the words pouring out now. Decades of isolation breaking open. Power, wealth, control, those were my shields. But you shattered them. Your courage, your beauty, the way you've survived everything life threw at you, it woke something in me I thought was dead. I love you, with everything I am, and I will spend the rest of my life proving it, if you'll let me." I did not rebelling. Tears streamed freely down her face. The emotional peak was shattering for her. The disorienting leap from destitution to being cherished by a man of immense power, for me. The vulnerable confession of a heart long hardened. She squeezed my hand weakly, pain and wonder mingling in her expression. "Ji-hoon, I've been alone so long, fighting for every day. I never thought," her voice broke again. "I love you too. God help me. I do. From the moment you didn't get angry in the café, from the way you protected us, I was terrified to admit it. But it's true. It's no half." The words undid me. I bowed my head over our joined hands, tears falling silently, tears I had not shed in decades. The passionate love surged mutual now, binding us in that quiet room. When the door opened softly, Amara and Malik peeked in, Grace supported by a nurse behind them, their faces lit at seeing their mother awake. Aaliyah smiled through tears, opening her good arm. The children rushed forward carefully, climbing onto the bed to hug her gently. I stepped back slightly, giving them space. But Aaliyah reached for me with her free hand. "Come here," she whispered. I did, sitting on the edge of the bed, enveloping them all in my arms. Grace watched from her wheelchair, eyes soft with understanding. In that moment of tenderness, family forged not by blood but by love and sacrifice, the torment quieted, the remorse remained. The dangers of my world loomed. But here, holding them, everything felt possible. The hospital vigil had brought confession, and with it, a future neither of us had dared dream. Weeks had passed since the ambush, and the private wing of the hospital had become our temporary home, a sanctuary of soft lighting, quiet corridors, and care that money made effortless. Aaliyah's recovery was steady, her shoulder healing under the best surgeons, color returning to her face as proper meals and rest worked their slow miracle on a body long deprived. The children visited daily, their laughter echoing down the halls, no longer shadowed by fear. Grace, too, grew stronger in the adjacent room, the infection that had nearly claimed her now a fading memory. I spent every possible moment there, balancing the demands of my world with this new center of my universe. Rivals had quieted for now, the message of consequences delivered clearly. But the inner turmoil never fully eased. Remorse gnawed deeper with each day, the knowledge that my intervention, born of love, had nearly cost Aaliyah her life. The passionate attachment burned fiercer than ever, anchoring me to her bedside, to stolen moments of holding her hand, whispering promises of a future free from the poverty that had crushed her for so long. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the large windows overlooking the city, I sat with Aaliyah in her room. She was propped up against pillows, looking more like herself, beautiful, resilient, the emaciation slowly filling out with proper nutrition. We spoke softly, planning small things, a real home, school for the children, time for Grace to simply rest. Her hand rested in mine, our fingers intertwined, the love between us a quiet flame. Grace was wheeled in by a nurse for a visit, her face brighter than I had ever seen it. Though still frail, strength had returned to her eyes. The fever's haze lifted. She smiled at us, taking in the way Aaliyah leaned toward me, the way my thumb traced gentle circles on her daughter's hand. "You too," Grace said softly, her voice warm with affection. "Look at you, like you've known each other forever. Number do eyes." Aaliyah blushed, glancing at me shyly. "Mama?" Grace's gaze drifted to the jade magpie pendant, visible at my collar. I had worn it openly since the ambush, a talisman of the mother I had lost and the family I had found. Her eyes narrowed slightly, recognition flickering. "That pendant," she murmured. "Magpie. Korean, isn't it? Symbol of joy, good news. Ezalis." I nodded, surprised. My mother gave it to me before she passed. That member sevens. Grace's expression softened further, memory surfacing. I knew a pendant like that once. Long time ago, Doe's time. She paused, then began to hum softly, a melody I recognized instantly, though I had not heard it in decades. Arirang, the ancient Korean folk song, haunting and beautiful, carrying centuries of longing and resilience. My breath caught, shock rippled through me, disorientation following, as Grace's frail voice grew stronger, singing the words in careful, accented Korean. Arirang, Arirang, Arario, crossing over Arirang Pass. The room fell silent except for her voice. Aaliyah looked between us, confusion deepening into wonder. The children, playing quietly in the corner, stopped to listen. I stared at Grace, tears welling, unbidden. "How?" I managed, voice rough. She smiled gently. reaching out a thin hand to touch the pendant. Back in the war, Korean War, I was a young army nurse, stationed near the front for a time, cared for wounded soldiers, Korean boys far from home. One of them, sweet young man, taught me that song, sang it when the pain was bad, when homesickness hit hardest, said the magpie brought good news. That one day he'd go home. There's this, her voice wavered with memory, eyes distant. He didn't make it, but that song, it stayed with me. Sang it to my own babies when they were scared. To Aaliyah when storms came. End quote. The Rellinglings Unfinal 23. The emotional peak crashed over me, violent, shattering. Shock gave way to deep emotional rupture. Tears streaming freely down my face for the first time since childhood. This woman Grace, who had suffered so much in poverty's grip, who had raised Aaliyah alone through hardship after hardship, had once extended kindness across oceans, across cultures, to a Korean soldier in his darkest hour. And now, decades later, fate had brought us together, her daughter, the love of my life. Me, the man protecting them all. I took her hand gently, bowing my head. Sobs shook me raw. Healing. The inner turmoil intensified to its breaking point. Remorse for lost years. For pain my world had. Months have passed since that Christmas Eve, when a spilled cup of coffee changed everything. The rivals are gone, their operations dismantled. Their threats silenced by consequences they could not outrun. Los Angeles breathes easier in the neighborhoods I watch over now. Not with fear, but with quiet respect. My world has shifted on its axis. No longer ruled by cold calculation alone, but by the fierce, burning love that Aaliyah awakened in me. We married on a soft spring afternoon in a small garden overlooking the Pacific. Just the two of us. The children. And Grace. No grand ceremony, only simple vows spoken beneath blooming jacarandas. Her hand steady in mine despite the lingering ache in her shoulder. She wore a plain white dress that made her dark skin glow. And when she smiled up at me, the loneliness that had defined my life for decades finally dissolved. We built a home together in the hills above the city, spacious, warm, filled with light and the sound of children's laughter. Amara and Malik run through rooms that once echoed only with silence. Their cheeks round and healthy now, their eyes bright with possibility. Grace has her own suite downstairs, tended by caregivers when needed. But mostly she sits with us at dinner, telling stories of her nursing days and singing old hymns that blend with the Korean lullabies I hum without thinking. Aaliyah and I blend our worlds in small, beautiful ways. She teaches me to cook collard greens slow and low with smoked turkey, the kitchen filled with scents that remind her of childhood Sundays. I show her how to make bulgogi on the backyard grill, wrapping thin slices of marinated beef in lettuce with gochujang she now loves. We celebrate Christmas with a tree taller than the children can reach, and Ciolo with traditional games and rice cake soup that Grace declares the best she has ever tasted. Our table holds both sweet potato pie and songpyeon, gospel music playing softly alongside trot songs from my mother's old records. Some nights, when the children are asleep and Grace has retired, Aaliyah and I sit on the terrace watching the city lights below. She rests her head on my shoulder, and I feel the weight of her past the years of hunger, of cold apartments and empty cupboards, of humiliation at food banks and overdue notices still lingering in the quiet moments. I hold her closer then, my arms a shield against memories that no longer have power. I carry my own weight still. The remorse never fully leaves, for Minjae sent away, for the suffering my world once ignored, for the bullet she took because of me. But love has taught me something deeper, knowledge that true strength is not in dominance alone, but in choosing compassion, life lesson that no amount of money can buy peace if the heart remains closed. Education, in the quiet power of mercy extended across, divides no one expected to cross. Knowledge that love does not see skin color or bank accounts. Life lesson that humanity thrives when we reach past our differences. Education in how one act of kindness can rewrite destinies. Aaliyah has shown me that wealth means nothing without someone to share it. That poverty cannot dim a spirit bright enough to save a stranger. I have shown her that power can protect instead of destroy. That safety is possible even after a lifetime of fear. We are proof that love transcends everything. Society tries to separate race, class, past mistakes. Wealth and poverty could not stop what began with a spilled cup of coffee and grew into a family forged by choice and grace. Knowledge shared through our story. Life lesson carried in every embrace. Education in the beauty of second chances. To everyone watching, may you carry this knowledge into your own days. May life lesson guide you toward kindness when it is hardest. May education open your heart to connections that defy expectation. Wishing you all good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. If this story touched you, if it made you think about love that crosses every boundary, about compassion that changes everything, please like, subscribe, and share Crimson Romance stories so more people can feel these emotions every day. Tell me in the comments, how did this story make you feel? Does it remind you of real life? Have you ever seen love overcome impossible divides? Thank you for being here. Goodbye, until the next video. I can't wait to share it with you.